September 24th, as you all know, is the birthday of Noble and Greenough School, founded in 1866 by George Washington Cobb Noble, that genial, warm, paternal, and familial gentleman who established this as a school centered about family, his family, a family devoted to the opportunity to care with and for one another in the common pursuit of education of the mind, body, and spirit for excellence and a life of service.
My name is Ted Gleason. I was born in Newton, Massachusetts in 1933. I grew up in Greater Boston. I went to Exeter to school and Harvard to college. I was in the Navy. I then went to Virginia Seminary in Alexandria. And then I served parishes in Exeter, New Hampshire and Arlington, Virginia. I became school minister of the Phillips Exeter Academy, then headmaster of Noble and Greenough School, which means that always I was involved in relating people to other people. My initial contact with Noble and Greenough School was with Dave Taylor, who was chair of the board, Stan DeLand, who was chair of the search committee, Bob Lawrence, who, unbeknownst to me then, was to succeed Taylor as head of the board.
We thought Ted had a real desire to run a school. The qualities that Noble's respects and tries to inculcate into its students, and which we like to see in the faculty members as well, of course.
It's an extraordinary lifelong experience for you to have met somebody who exemplifies timeless virtues like Ted Gleason, somebody I think of as an exemplar of a timeless, manly Christian virtue, a value code, a set of morals, a way of looking at the world, a way of anchoring your worldview in timeless principles, in enduring values.
When Ted believed in someone, there was no limit to the trust and loyalty he gave to that individual.
When you look at the history of Nobles, there have been relatively few headmasters, of course, Noble, Greenough, Wiggins, Putnam, Gleason, Baker, Henderson. And I think they've all brought something unique and wonderful to the institution. But Ted had a very, very important era to shepherd, and certainly going co-ed, increasing the size of the school, increasing the plant. He did really a remarkable job, and he kind of laid the way for what's happened in the last 15 to 20 years, which is just remarkable. I call it Noble's University now. It's, in the best sense, a remarkable school, I think.
He was just right for the job. He was the right man at the right time.
We'd come to a point in time where the future was what we were aiming towards, and that meant that all kinds of possibilities were opened up to us. And coeducation being the most significant.
Experience showed that classes that were composed of both sexes were more lively, they seemed to, the girls, if you will, seemed to bring out the best in boys, maybe because they were a little bit more serious about their education than boys tended to be.
There were 13 girls who are either sisters of graduates or present students or children of graduates who wanted to come to Noble. So therefore, when we admitted the first group of girls, which as I recall numbered some 60, which was a very significant number, 13 of them were members of the first class. So you had instant leadership from people who wanted to be at Noble's, who had a prior connection with the school, and were enormously important in that first year of coeducation because they were the student leaders of the school.
Ted's role in that process focused on bringing in the adults who were to be the change agents. The primary one was a woman by the name of Mary Wells, and she was able to make those of us who perhaps would not have welcomed coeducation into the school accept it very easily.
He did a masterful job of respecting the past, but also embracing the future. And I'm sure there were moments when it wasn't easy, and there were members of the Nobles constituency who said, don't get rid of the all boys traditions. And then there were other people saying, embrace what is new. And he seemed to do it with great success.
The first girls entered Noble and Greenough School in the fall of 1974. We became fully coeducated within 3 years. And the primary goal, one of the goals at that time, was to come to full parity. That is, that we would be a school that were 50% boys and 50% girls. At the same time that we were doing this, while we were a little ahead of a lot of schools, many other schools were coeducating. No school in my recollection came to full coeducation the way Noble and Greenough did. We were committed from the beginning that if we were going to coeducate, there was going to be nothing token about it. Also, the most symbolic, saying this school is willing to move forward and to change in dramatic and different ways. It was a very smooth and felicitous and happy transition.
As a student who showed up, I felt there were programs to be in, there were teams to play on, groups to sing in, and your voice was really heard in the classroom. And I also clearly remembering that the boys enjoyed us being there.
This was a fertile start which Noble so needed to move to where it is today.
Early on, I decided that the most important thing was hiring members of the faculty. And I hired a very significant number over those period of years, and I certainly interviewed, many more than that. For each position, I probably interviewed 4 or 5 different people. And it seemed important to me never to delegate that decision, to involve other people in it, but it was your decision. And as I look back on all those years, I'd say the most significant thing I did was I hired a lot of extremely good people. And I was looking for passion, would be one word. A person who was really rooted and grounded in something that he or she believed in intensely and wanted to communicate.
Think about Joe Swayze and the Noblemen. Think about Bob Freeman and his art. Think about Kearns and Percival and what they did with the theater. Think about the teaching of Baker, Carey.
And then you reflect on who some of these people were, the department chairmen that have evolved through time. Baker, who was the first person I hired to teach in English, Nickerson, who became chairman of the math department, Harrington became chairman of the Latin department, Skilko, chairman of the science department, and Bill Chamberlain, who I also hired very early, became the first head of under my headmastership of the lower school, and then went on to do all kinds of other things, including finishing up being business manager.
It's a testimony to Ted that so many of them, years after he left the position as headmaster, are still at the school and nurturing students to this day.
I did see that the qualities of teaching transcended the content, and I really was inspired by other teachers at school. They really were about making you successful as a student.
Ted was asked for a recommendation, and in it he said, Brian enjoys my leadership style, which is for people to work with, not at the direction of one another.
Looking back at the 16 years during which I was headmaster of Noble and Greenough School, 2 substantial and primary convictions. One was that this school was 105 years old and had a proud and long and important tradition. The other was that we'd come to a point in time where the future was what we were aiming towards, and that meant that all kinds of possibilities were opened up to us.
That we would start to expand the music department, and we started offering a couple of music courses to the upper grades, classes 1 through 4. And I taught music theory, music appreciation. We started what we call the chamber course, which I believe is still going at Noble's. Of course, at all these times, the Nobleonians were going along, and then later the Greensleeves. Those were directed by other people.
George Leighton Bridge had come to direct the art department. Art had always existed at Noble's for as long as I knew, but never with the strength and the stature that Leighton brought to it, and built a department person by person by person, adding Lisa Colt and then other people to work in ceramics and other media, and Bob Freeman as artist in residence.
He was a working artist, and he truly was an artist in residence in that he did his art and he did Noble's, and that was a wonderful thing that Ted set up.
First, most significant new change had to do with expansion of fine arts and the performing arts, drama.
Ted hired Lake Bobbitt, and Lake did amazing things with theater at the school without getting any great change in the actual physical makeup, with the exception of the Lawrence Auditorium, which had to serve also as the school's primary theater venue.
It was 1976, and we needed a really strong performing arts department, and I remember that search very well because I interviewed, I think, 53 different people, and it was when Michael Percival came, and really, within a very short period of time, Noble and Greenough School had really the best performing arts department in the greater Boston area. 3 dramatic productions a year, but particularly marked by a spring musical which brought together more than 100 students to tech work as well as acting and music and dance. It was a massive undertaking which involved, as I say, a very large number of people. Someone had to take a stage that had never been created to put on big performances. It was Peter Kearns who was in charge of tech theater, and Kearns was essential to making that all happen.
And lots of people got involved at all levels in the spring musical, and you could do that and play a sport, and that was really embraced at that period of time.
When I came to Noble and Greenough School, there was a newspaper which I thought was really kind of a pathetic excuse for a newspaper. It was not very good. And one of my objectives was to hire a person who could come and really turn that into a first-rate newspaper. And I found that person in Joe Swayze, who came to teach photography, but had a considerable background in journalism.
A Photo 1 course turned into a Photo 2 course, turned into a documentary photography course, and at the same time I got involved in the student newspaper, The Nobleman.
For over 20 years or more, he guided that paper to, and it was all done by students, but he was in the background, into a level of really significant excellence, where they allow students to say what they really think.
His advice to me was to make sure the students take it seriously and to be professional in their job. He wanted them to be good writers. He wanted them to examine the school the way he wanted the faculty to examine the school.
Nobles has made a great contribution to the world around it, and it should be very proud of that contribution and should be steadfast in its desire to continue that contribution. The first question I was asked was, what would you most want to do if you were headmaster? And I said, teach. And that proved to be exactly correct. That while I was headmaster, I suppose nothing I did I enjoy more. And I'm sure that both Dick Baker and Bob Henderson would agree with me. It meant that 2 times every day, because I taught 2 courses during the years I was headmaster, I would be out of the office and into the classroom with a group of students, either in the 9th and 10th grade or in the 12th grade. The highest premium is placed upon the life of the mind, on working with the intellect, forging new frontiers for each individual student within the academic realm. In order for students to develop that, they need first to be encouraged. They need first to be shown where are the places where they have strengths, where they can grow. I don't believe school is a preparation. School is an entity in and of itself. It's where life is lived and where people grow and change and develop. Out of that comes a new opportunity. Everything in an independent school flows one of honesty and openness. Then one has that kind of relationship with members of the faculty, and they one with another, and they in turn have that with students, and students with one another. And that something develops which begins to have a life of its own, and which is what makes this particular school unique.
When I think back to Ted and Nobles, I think of his own family, Anne, Sarah, Persis, Eliza, and what an integral part they played in all our lives. And really, they made us all part of one big, happy family.
And for me, and during all those years, it was summed up by the word family.
George Washington Copp, noble, what a man is he. He'll pick the lock on Harvard's door and open that door for me. And Frank Hatch Sr. wrote that. And we had a lot of fun with that show. That was my first year in the spring of 1966, the 100th anniversary.